The frozen forest air tasted like copper and fear. Lyra Frost's lungs burned as she dodged behind an ancient pine, her breath coming in controlled bursts that created small clouds in the winter darkness. 4 hunters circled her position, their boots crunching through snow that had turned pink with blood under the moon's cold gaze. Not her blood. Not yet. She'd killed 2 of them already. The first had gone down with her makeshift blade buried in his throat, surprise frozen on his face when the Omega he'd been tracking fought back with military precision. The second had lasted longer, long enough to realize the woman he was hunting had been trained in ways that shouldn't have been possible for someone of her rank. His final scream had echoed through the trees before she'd silenced it permanently. 2 down, 4 remaining. And somewhere in the darkness, hidden in the hollow of a dead oak tree, her 5-year-old daughter was watching everything. Lyra could feel Nova's terror through the bond they shared, that strange connection that went deeper than normal parent and child. The little girl's eyes would be wide, one iris glowing silver like moonlight on water, the other burning with crimson fire. Hybrid eyes, impossible eyes, the kind of eyes that got children killed in a world that feared what it couldn't understand. A twig snapped to her left. Lyra moved before conscious thought could slow her down, rolling low as a silver blade whistled through the space where her head had been. The hunter who'd swung it was already adjusting his stance, professional, trained. She recognized the technique from her own service in the territorial wars. Royal Guard. These weren't common thugs hired for a quick capture. This was an official operation. The realization sent ice through her veins that had nothing to do with the winter cold. She came up from her roll with a handful of snow and pine needles, threw it into the guard's face, bought herself 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, she closed the distance, drove her knee into his liver, felt his breath explode outward in a surprised grunt. As he bent forward, she brought her elbow down on the back of his neck. Not hard enough to kill, hard enough to make him wish he was dead. 3 down. The remaining hunter's voice crackled through a radio at his belt. Lyra heard it clearly in the winter stillness, every word a nail in the coffin she'd been trying to avoid for 3 years. Target acquired. She's got a pup with her. Female, approximately 5 years old. A pause. Then the voice on the other end. Female, cold as the snow beneath their feet. Raven Ashford en route. Lady Seraphina Blackwater wants them both alive. Repeat, alive. The child especially. The child especially. Lyra felt something ancient and primal surge through her chest, the silver wolf that lived beneath her skin, demanding release. For 3 years, she'd kept it chained, suppressed, hidden under layers of learned helplessness and Omega submission. Now, it wanted blood. Now it wanted to paint the snow red with the entrails of anyone who threatened her daughter. She forced it down, forced herself to think like the tactical medic she'd been before the running started, before the fear became her constant companion. 4 hunters down or disabled meant the odds had shifted, but Royal Guard traveled in units of 6 minimum. Where were the other 2? The answer came in the form of movement behind her, twin shapes materializing from the darkness like wolves themselves. She'd been flanked. While she'd been focused on the obvious threats, the smart ones had circled around. Professional, efficient. The kind of trap she would have set herself back when she wore the uniform instead of running from it. Lady Frost. The voice came from her right, male, familiar in a way that made her stomach drop. It's been a long time. She knew that voice, knew it from morning briefings and midnight strategy sessions, from the desperate months of the border wars when they'd fought side by side against enemies that wanted to tear their territory apart. Beta Finn, the Alpha King's right hand, the man she'd trusted with field intelligence that saved hundreds of lives, the man who was now hunting her. Lyra turned slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. The wolf inside her snarled at the submission, but she ignored it. Finn stood 10 feet away, another guard beside him, both with weapons drawn but not aimed. Not yet. His face looked older than she remembered, lines carved deep around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and hard choices. Finn, her voice came out steady despite the fear coursing through her. You're leading them personally. That's either a great honor or I'm more dangerous than I thought. You killed 2 royal guards. His expression gave nothing away. "Disabled 2 more. That makes you very dangerous, or very desperate." "Both." She shifted her weight, calculating distances, angles, the chances she could reach Nova and run before they took her down. 0. The math was brutal and clear. "Let me guess. Serafina Blackwater finally figured out where we were hiding. 3 years is a good run, all things considered." 6 months. Finn's words hit like a physical blow. "We've known your location for 6 months, Lyra." The world tilted sideways. 6 months. They'd been watching for 6 months while she'd scraped together food and shelter, while she'd taught Nova to hide her nature, while she'd jumped at every shadow. 6 months of terror that could have ended at any moment. Why? The question came out raw, unguarded. "If you knew where we were, why wait?" Finn's jaw tightened. Something flickered in his eyes that might have been regret, or pity, or both. "Because the Alpha King's orders were to locate and monitor, not capture. We were protecting you, Lyra, from people exactly like Serafina's faction." "You have a strange definition of protection." She glanced toward the hollow oak, saw nothing but darkness, prayed Nova was staying hidden like she'd been taught. "If Kale wanted to protect us, he had 3 years to do it. Instead, I got silence and an engagement announcement to someone else. That engagement was fake, a tactical operation to draw out assassins from the Bloodfang Alliance." Finn took a careful step forward, hands still visible, still non-threatening. "The woman you saw in the announcement was an actress using his mother's maiden name. Lady Alara Thornfield never existed. The whole thing was theater." The words should have brought relief or anger or something clean and simple. Instead, they brought a wave of exhaustion so profound it made her knees weak. 3 years. 3 years of running based on a lie, on a misunderstanding, on her own fear and his need for operational security. 3 years that Nova had spent hiding in caves and abandoned buildings instead of playing in sunlight like a normal child. "It doesn't matter now." Lyra straightened her spine, forced steel into her voice. "Serafina knows about Nova. She's claiming custody, isn't she? Using some legal loophole about abandoned pups needing proper upbringing from appropriate guardians. The papers are already drawn up." Finn's voice carried genuine regret now. "She's been building her case for months. Position herself as the likely choice for Luna at the selection ceremony. Discover a hidden bastard child. Offer to raise her properly as a way to save the Alpha King from scandal. It's elegant politically. The council would approve it in a heartbeat." Bastard child. The words made her want to laugh or scream or both. Nova wasn't a bastard. She was the legitimate daughter of the Alpha King and his true mate, born from a bond that had snapped into place with the force of destiny itself 5 years ago in a mountain cave while snow fell outside and enemies hunted them both. But they couldn't prove it. Not without revealing what Lyra was, what bloodline ran through her veins, what ancient power had been thought extinct for 30 years. The moment the council learned Nova was half Moonweaver, custody papers would be the least of their problems. Execution orders would follow within hours. "So you're here to take us in?" It wasn't a question. "Deliver us to Serafina so she can separate me from my daughter and raise Nova as some kind of political prop." "No." Finn's voice went hard, edged with something that sounded like anger. "I'm here to bring you in before Serafina's people do. There's a difference. One option keeps you breathing. The other doesn't." Lyra studied his face, looking for deception, for hidden threats. Found only exhaustion that matched her own, and something else. Loyalty. Not to Serafina, not even to the council. To the man he served, the Alpha King, who'd spent 3 years searching for a woman who'd vanished into winter darkness. She had 2 choices. Fight, and Nova would be caught in the crossfire. Surrender, and trust that whatever plan Finn was hinting at would be better than what Serafina had waiting. Neither option was good. Both could end with her daughter in enemy hands. "If I come quietly," Lyra said slowly, "you give me your word that Nova stays with me. No separation, not even for processing or medical examination or whatever other bureaucratic excuse they try to use." "You have my word." Finn holstered his weapon in a gesture of good faith. The Alpha King's orders were explicit. You and the child are to be brought to him personally. No one else touches her. The Alpha King, Kale Stormborn, the man she'd loved with a fierceness that still ached in her chest, despite 3 years and 1,000 miles of separation. The man whose storm-gray eyes had looked at her like she was something precious instead of something to be used and discarded. The man whose child she'd carried alone through winter forests while her body tore itself apart, bringing new life into a world that wanted that life extinguished. All right. Lyra raised her hands fully, the universal gesture of surrender. I'll come. But Finn, if you're lying to me, if this is some trick to make the capture easier, I promise you'll regret it. I've learned things in 3 years on the run, things about what I'm capable of when someone threatens my child. I believe you. Finn gestured to the other guards. Stand down. Lady Frost is cooperating. The guards lowered their weapons but didn't sheathe them, professional caution keeping them alert. Lyra walked slowly toward the hollow oak, each step measured, her whole body tensed for betrayal. She reached the tree, knelt down, whispered into the darkness. Little star, it's safe. You can come out now. For a moment nothing happened. Then a small shape emerged from the hollow, a tiny girl with tangled dark hair and eyes that shouldn't exist. One silver, one crimson, both filled with tears and terror. Nova's arms wrapped around Lyra's neck with desperate strength, her whole body trembling. Mommy, I was so scared. The bad men, they wanted to hurt you. I know, baby. Lyra held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, pine needles and smoke, and something indefinably sweet. But we're safe now. These men aren't going to hurt us. Promise? Nova's whisper was so quiet, only Lyra could hear it. Promise. Lyra pulled back just enough to look into those impossible eyes. Do you remember what I taught you? About hiding what you are? Nova nodded, and as Lyra watched, the colors in her eyes began to fade, shifting, changing, until both appeared a normal dark brown. Not perfect. Anyone looking closely would see the wrongness in them, the way light moved strangely across the irises. But in dim light, from a distance, they could pass for human enough. Finn made a small sound of surprise. The child can control her manifestation? At 5 years old? She's special. Lyra stood, lifting Nova with her. The girl weighed almost nothing, too thin from too many nights without enough food. More special than you know. And if Seraphina thinks she's going to use my daughter as a stepping stone to power, she's going to learn exactly what a Moonweaver can do when you threaten her pack. The words hung in the frozen air like a challenge. Finn's eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of his shock at hearing the forbidden words spoken aloud. Moonweaver, the bloodline that was supposed to be extinct, wiped out in the Great Purge 30 years ago when fear and superstition had driven the Council to genocide. You just confirmed what I suspected. Finn's voice was carefully neutral. The Alpha King is going to want to know everything. Then take me to him. Lyra adjusted Nova's weight on her hip, met Finn's gaze with steel in her own. But understand something. I've spent 3 years protecting this child from people who want her dead for the crime of existing. I won't stop now. Not for you, not for the Council, not even for Kale himself if he tries to take her from me. Noted. Finn gestured toward the forest edge where vehicles waited in the darkness. The Alpha King is waiting at a secure location, neutral ground, the Warehouse District at the edge of Shadow Moon territory. Warehouse District. Lyra's laugh was bitter. How appropriate, taking the trash to where the rest of the garbage gets processed. Taking a Luna to meet her mate, Finn corrected quietly. There's a difference. The words stopped her cold. Luna. The title she should have claimed 5 years ago when the mate bond snapped into place. The title that Seraphina Blackwater was positioning herself to steal through political maneuvering and calculated ambition. They walked through the forest in silence, surrounded by guards who kept their distance but stayed alert. Nova had her face buried in Lyra's neck, her small body still trembling with aftershocks of fear. Lyra murmured soft reassurances, old lullabies her mother had taught her back when Moonweavers could still sing their songs without fear of execution. The vehicles were military-grade, armored against attack both physical and magical. Lyra settled into the back seat with Nova on her lap, Finn taking the seat across from them. The door closed with the heavy thunk of reinforced steel, sealing them into artificial warmth and artificial safety. "How long until we arrive?" Lyra asked as the vehicle began moving. 20 minutes. Finn pulled out a tablet, began typing with swift efficiency. "I'm sending word ahead that we're en route. The Alpha King will want time to prepare." "Prepare for what? An execution?" "Prepare for you." Finn looked up from the tablet, his expression softer than she'd seen it. "Lyra, he's been looking for you for 3 years. Every spare resource, every available tracker, every favor he could call in went toward finding you. The man I've served for a decade, the warrior who never shows weakness, who leads armies without breaking stride, broke down when the trail went cold last winter. So no, not an execution. A reunion." Something in Lyra's chest twisted painfully. She'd spent 3 years building walls around her heart, convincing herself that what they'd shared was temporary, a wartime fling that meant nothing once the bullets stopped flying and reality set back in. Easier to believe she'd been used and discarded than to face the alternative, that he'd wanted her, searched for her, grieved her loss while she ran from shadows. "What happened to the fake engagement?" she asked, needing to understand, needing the pieces to fit together. If it was just an operation, why did it last 2 months? Why were there public appearances and official announcements? "Because it worked." Finn's voice went grim. "We caught 9 Bloodfang assassins in the first month. They thought targeting his fiancée would destabilize him emotionally, make him vulnerable. What they didn't know was that Lady Alara Thornfield was actually Lieutenant Sarah Marks from the Special Operations Division, with a full security detail disguised as handmaidens. So Cale was never actually engaged. Never. The whole thing was smoke and mirrors." Finn hesitated, then added quietly, "But someone leaked the operational details. The assassins figured out it was a trap. They shifted their target priorities, started hunting anyone who'd been close to the Alpha King during the border wars, anyone he might actually care about." Understanding crashed over her like a frozen wave. "They came after me. 4 teams. We intercepted 3 of them. The 4th got close enough that Kyle made the call to shut down the operation and warn you directly. By the time his messenger reached your last known location, you were gone. Vanished like you'd never existed. It took us 6 months to pick up your trail again, another year to track you to the Northern Territories, another year before we confirmed you were alive and moving through the wilderness like a ghost." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the weight of wasted time pressing down on her chest. 3 years. 3 years that Nova could have spent safe in the palace instead of shivering in caves. 3 years that Lyra could have spent beside her mate instead of running from shadows that were trying to protect her. "I saw the announcement on a television in a human town." Her voice came out hollow. "Saw him standing beside a beautiful woman in a white dress, looking like the perfect political couple. I was 3 months pregnant, sick every morning, barely able to keep food down, and I thought I'd been such a fool to believe he could actually want someone like me. Someone like you saved his life twice during the border wars." Finn's words were hard, factual. "Someone like you pulled 14 wounded wolves from a collapsing bunker while under enemy fire. Someone like you performed emergency field surgery on my beta commander with nothing but a combat knife and whiskey for anesthetic. The Alpha King doesn't forget things like that. He doesn't forget people who matter." Nova stirred against Lyra's chest, her small voice muffled but clear. "Mommy, is Daddy going to be angry at us?" The question made Lyra's throat tight. Daddy. Nova had never met Cale, had only heard stories whispered in the darkness, tales of a great king who ruled with strength and honor, tales that Lyra had told despite her own anger and fear, because a daughter deserved to know her father was more than just absence and abandonment. "I don't know, little star." Lyra stroked Nova's hair, felt the silky strands slip through her fingers. "But whatever happens, we face it together, like always." The vehicle slowed, turned onto rougher road. Through the tinted windows, Lyra could see the skeletal shapes of abandoned warehouses rising against the night sky, industrial monuments to prosperity that had moved elsewhere. The perfect location for a meeting that needed to stay off official records. They stopped in front of a particularly large structure, its metal walls scarred with rust and old graffiti. Guards stood at every entrance, professional soldiers in unmarked combat gear. This wasn't a casual meeting. This was a tactical operation with security protocols and backup plans. Finn opened the door, gestured for Lyra to exit. She did so carefully, Nova still clinging to her neck, the little girl's face hidden against her shoulder. The night air bit at exposed skin, winter still holding the land in its frozen grip, despite the promise of spring lurking beneath the ice. "This way." Finn led them toward a side entrance, guards parting to let them through. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit by portable lights that created pools of illumination separated by shadows. Lyra's military training cataloged exits, cover positions, potential threats. Old habits died hard. In the center of the open space, a figure waited. Even in shadow, even after 3 years, Lyra would have recognized him anywhere. Kael Stormborn stood with the stillness of a predator at rest, 6 feet and 5 inches of controlled power wrapped in dark clothing that emphasized rather than hid his warrior's build. His storm-gray eyes tracked their approach with an intensity that made her breath catch. Those eyes. She'd dreamed about those eyes through 3 years of running and hiding, dreamed about the way they'd looked at her in the cave, like she was something precious instead of something broken. Dreamed about the moment they'd shifted from gray to molten silver when the mate bond had snapped into place between them, an invisible tether that still pulled at her chest despite time and distance. Finn stopped 10 feet away, bowed slightly in a gesture of respect. "My king, Lady Lyra Frost and her daughter as requested." Kael didn't acknowledge Finn's words. His entire focus was locked on Lyra, on Nova, on the impossible reality of them standing before him after 3 years of fruitless searching. She saw the moment his gaze landed on Nova, saw something flicker across his face, too fast to name. Recognition? Hope? Pain? "Nova," Lyra whispered against her daughter's hair. "Someone wants to meet you. Can you be brave for me?" The little girl lifted her head slowly, turned to look at the tall man watching them with such intensity. Her eyes were still hidden, still appearing human brown in the dim light. She studied Kael with a child's frank assessment, taking in his height, his scars, the way he held himself like violence was always an option, but never the first choice. Then Nova said the words that changed everything. "You have eyes like mine." The warehouse went absolutely silent. Even the guards stationed around the perimeter seemed to stop breathing. Kael's expression cracked, something raw and vulnerable showing through the warrior king facade. "Do I?" His voice was rougher than Lyra remembered, aged by sleepless nights and hard choices. "What color are your eyes, little one?" Nova glanced at Lyra, seeking permission. Lyra nodded, knowing they were past the point of hiding, past the point of running. If they were going to face what came next, they would face it as they were, not as what fear demanded they pretend to be. The little girl turned back to Kael and let her eyes change. Silver and crimson, Moonweaver and Alpha King, impossible and undeniable, glowing in the warehouse darkness like twin flames that defied every law of nature the council claimed to uphold. Hybrid eyes that shouldn't exist because hybrid children died in infancy, torn apart by bloodlines that warred inside them. Except Nova hadn't died. She'd survived 5 years, grown strong and clever and brave, living proof that true mate bonds could create something new instead of something broken. Kael made a sound low in his throat, half growl and half something that might have been a sob. He took 1 step forward, then stopped himself, hands clenched at his sides. Lyra saw the tremor run through his frame and understood with sudden clarity what it cost him not to close the distance, not to reach out and touch the daughter he'd never known existed. The curse. The touch curse that had plagued him since the border wars, since the night he'd been wounded by dark magic that turned his greatest strength into his deepest weakness. He couldn't touch anyone without pain, couldn't embrace or comfort or connect through physical contact without his own body betraying him with agony. "I would very much like to come closer." Cale's words were careful, controlled, directed at Nova with a gentleness that made Lyra's eyes burn. "But I need to warn you first. I have something called a touch curse. It means when people touch me, it hurts. Not them. Me. I don't want to frighten you if I react badly." Nova tilted her head, considering this information with a seriousness beyond her years. "Mommy says pain is just your body telling you something's wrong. Maybe your body is telling you wrong things?" "Maybe." Cale's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "I've certainly met my share of things that lie." "I won't hurt you," Nova said with absolute conviction. "I'm little. Little things don't hurt." Before Lyra could stop her, before anyone could react, Nova wriggled free from her arms and dropped to the warehouse floor. She walked toward Cale with a child's fearless confidence, her small hand reaching up toward his much larger one. Lyra's heart stopped beating. She lunged forward, but Finn caught her arm, held her back with gentle strength. "Wait!" Finn's whisper was urgent. "Just wait." Nova's tiny fingers brushed against Cale's palm. He went rigid, every muscle in his body locking tight. Lyra saw pain flash across his face, saw his jaw clench against what had to be agony, but he didn't pull away, didn't flinch back, stood there and endured while his daughter's hand rested trustingly in his own. "Does it hurt bad?" Nova asked, worried now. "Yes," Cale's voice was strangled, "but it's worth it." "Why?" "Because you're my daughter." The words came out raw, unfiltered. "And I've waited 5 years to meet you." Nova's eyes went wide. "You knew about me?" "No." Cale managed to gentle his voice despite the obvious pain. "But I know now, and I'm very glad I do." Something shifted in the air around them, a subtle change in pressure that made Lyra's wolf stir uneasily. The mate bond, she realized. It was reacting to Nova's presence, to the physical connection between father and daughter, strengthening, solidifying, becoming more real with every second that passed. "Your Majesty," a new voice interrupted from the warehouse entrance, female and sharp as broken glass. "I must protest this irregular meeting." Lyra turned to see a woman striding into the warehouse, flanked by guards wearing different insignia. Seraphina Blackwater. She looked exactly like her reputation suggested, beautiful in a cold, calculating way, blonde hair pulled back in a severe style that emphasized aristocratic cheekbones and eyes like blue ice. Behind Seraphina came others, more guards, council members in formal robes, a dozen young women in ceremonial silver, the Alpha daughters who'd come for the selection ceremony, come to compete for the title of Luna Queen and the power that came with it. Cale's expression went flat, dangerous. His hand tightened fractionally around Nova's, despite the pain it must have caused. "Lady Seraphina, this is a private meeting." "Private?" Seraphina's laugh was crystalline and cruel. "Your Majesty, you've been missing for 6 hours. The lunar selection ceremony begins in 48 hours. The council has been searching frantically, and we find you here, in a warehouse, with some Omega and her bastard child." The word bastard cracked through the space like a whip. Nova flinched. Cale's eyes flashed crimson, pure alpha rage barely leashed. "Mind, your tongue." Each word was a threat wrapped in silk. "You're speaking about my daughter." The warehouse erupted into chaos. Council members shouting questions, Alpha daughters exchanging shocked looks, Seraphina's face draining of color before flushing with rage. Through it all, Cale stood unmoved, Nova's hand still clasped in his own despite the agony it must be causing. An elderly man in elaborate robes stepped forward, his weathered face grave. Elder Tobias, Lyra recognized him from briefings during the war. Council leader, the most powerful wolf in the territories, after the Alpha King himself. "Your Majesty." Tobias's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "These are serious claims. If you're stating this child is your biological offspring, we'll need proof. The lunar selection ceremony depends on the Alpha King being unmated. If you have a child by a true mate, the entire ceremony is invalidated. Good. Kael's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Because I was planning to invalidate it anyway. You can't! Seraphina took a step forward, her carefully constructed composure cracking. The council voted. 12 alpha daughters from the 7 territories. You must choose one by the blood moon or the alliance fractures. We'll return to the territorial wars, to bloodshed and chaos. Then we'll have war. Kael's voice went deadly quiet. Because I won't choose any of you. I already have my mate. Every eye in the warehouse turned to Lyra. She stood frozen, Nova's absence from her arms, leaving her feeling exposed, vulnerable. The weight of a dozen hostile stares pressed against her skin like physical force. Her? One of the alpha daughters stepped forward, a tall woman with cruel eyes and a mechanical brace on her arm, Princess Isla of Ironwood. Your Majesty, she's clearly Omega. Look at her. No alpha bearing, no power signature, nothing that marks her as suitable for a Luna Queen. You're right. Kael's words made Lyra's heart sink. She's not Omega at all. She's something much rarer, much more dangerous. And if you're very lucky, she'll let you live long enough to learn what that means. He held out his free hand toward Lyra, an invitation and a challenge both. Show them. Show them what you showed me in the cave 5 years ago. Show them why our daughter has eyes that shouldn't exist. Lyra looked at Nova, still holding Kael's hand, still trusting despite everything. Looked at the council members and alpha daughters and guards, all watching with varying degrees of hostility and curiosity. Looked at Seraphina, whose blue eyes promised death the moment she had the opportunity to deliver it. Then Lyra made her choice. She let her eyes change, let the silver light that lived behind her irises blaze forth, pure and undeniable. Let them see the truth she'd been hiding for 30 years, the bloodline that was supposed to be extinct, the power that terrified them more than any enemy army ever could. Moonweaver. The warehouse exploded into pandemonium. Wolves shifted involuntarily, responding to the ancient power on display. Council members stumbled backward. Several alpha daughters drew weapons. Seraphina's face twisted with something between triumph and terror. "Kill her!" someone shouted. "The purge laws! She should have been eliminated as a child!" "Silence!" Kael's alpha command crashed over them like a tidal wave, forcing every wolf in the warehouse to their knees. Every wolf except Lyra, who stood untouched by the command, and Nova, who watched everything with those impossible hybrid eyes. The purge laws, Kael's voice carried absolute authority, were based on lies and fear. They were written by cowards who wanted to protect their own power structures by eliminating anyone who threatened them, and I'm done pretending they have any validity. Elder Tobias struggled to his feet, his aged face flushed. Your Majesty, you cannot simply overturn 30 years of established law. The Moonweavers were eliminated because they were dangerous. They could bear true mate children to any alpha regardless of rank or bloodline. They threatened the carefully maintained balance of power. You mean they threatened your arranged marriages and political alliances? Kael's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. They threatened your ability to control who mated whom, who inherited what, who held power where. So you branded them abominations and had them slaughtered. Men, women, children, entire family lines erased because you were afraid. They were a threat to pack stability. Alpha Ronan of Ironwood pushed through the crowd, his face dark with anger. The council voted unanimously. The purge was necessary. The council was wrong. Kael released Nova's hand finally, his palm trembling from sustained pain. And I'm correcting that mistake. As of this moment, the purge laws are revoked. Any wolf of any bloodline is welcome in my territory. Anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to leave. You're throwing away the alliance. Seraphina's voice shook with barely contained rage. Everything you built, everything you sacrificed for, gone because you can't keep your hands off an Omega who should have been put down 30 years ago. Kael moved faster than thought, covering the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch Seraphina, didn't need to. His presence alone was weapon enough. She stumbled backward, her careful composure shattering entirely. "That Omega," Kale's words were soft, dangerous, "has survived 3 years in the wilderness with a child who should have died in infancy, has evaded trained hunters, avoided detection by my own scouts, fought off assassins, and kept herself and Nova alive through nothing but determination and skill. She has more strength in her smallest finger than you have in your entire body. So if I were you, I'd choose my next words very carefully." Serafina's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words emerged. She looked like a fish drowning in air, her blue eyes wide with something that might have been realization. She'd lost. All her careful planning, all her political maneuvering, all her positioning to become Luna Queen had just crumbled to dust. However, Kale turned back to address the full warehouse. "Lady Serafina is correct about one thing. The lunar selection ceremony is in 48 hours, and I do need to choose a Luna Queen if I want to maintain the alliance between territories." Hope flared in Serafina's eyes. Several alpha daughters straightened, preening despite the chaos. "So I'm choosing Lyra Frost." Kale held out his hand again, this time toward his mate. "The woman I should have claimed 5 years ago, the mother of my daughter and my true mate. If anyone has objections, voice them now or accept my decision." "I object!" Serafina's shriek was desperate, unhinged. "She's not one of the approved candidates. The ceremony requires choice from the 12 presented daughters. Those are the rules." "Then we'll change the rules." Kale kept his hand extended, kept his eyes locked on Lyra. "Well, are you going to make me stand here like an idiot all night? Or are you going to come claim what's yours?" Lyra looked at that outstretched hand, scarred from 1,000 battles, trembling from the pain the curse inflicted but steady in its purpose. Looked at Nova, who was smiling now, her impossible eyes bright with hope. Looked at the assembled crowd, some hostile, some curious, all waiting to see what she would do. She thought about 3 years of running, 3 years of fear and hunger and constant vigilance, 3 years of telling herself she was better off alone than risking her heart again. Then she thought about the cave, about snowfall and whispered promises, about the moment the mate bond had snapped into place and remade her understanding of what possible meant. Lyra Frost walked forward and took Kale Stormborn's hand in her own. The bond flared between them like lightning striking earth, visible to every wolf in the warehouse. Silver and storm-gray light twined together, creating patterns in the air that spoke of ancient magic and newer still. The curse should have activated, should have sent Kale to his knees with agony. Instead, he stood tall, his fingers tightening around hers, his eyes blazing with triumph and relief and love that had survived 3 years of separation. "Impossible," Elder Tobias breathed. "The curse, it's not activating." "True mate bonds override curses." Finn's voice carried quiet satisfaction. "It's in the old texts. I looked it up when I started suspecting." "Then the child really is his heir." Another council member, younger, looked between Kale and Nova with dawning understanding. "A hybrid born from a true mate bond. That's never happened before." "Because you killed all the Moonweavers before they could have children with their true mates." Lyra's voice rang clear and cold. "You eliminated entire bloodlines out of fear and called it justice. Well, I'm still here. My daughter is still here, and we're not hiding anymore." Serafina made a sound like a wounded animal. "This isn't over. There are laws, protocols. You can't just waltz in here and claim Luna Queen without going through the proper channels." Actually, Elder Tobias surprised everyone by speaking up, his weathered face thoughtful. "There is a precedent, the trial of worth. If a candidate wishes to bypass the lunar selection ceremony, she may invoke ancient right and undergo 3 tests: strategy, strength, and sacrifice. Pass all 3, and she's deemed worthy of the title regardless of political considerations. The trial hasn't been invoked in 300 years. Serafina latched onto this like a drowning woman grabbing a rope. And for good reason. It's brutal, designed to break candidates who aren't strong enough for leadership. If she invokes it and fails, she's barred from ever bonding with any alpha, and her bloodline is marked as unworthy for 3 generations. All eyes turned to Lyra. She felt the weight of their stares, the expectation and judgment and hope all tangled together. 3 tests. 3 chances to fail, to lose not just herself, but Nova's future, to condemn her daughter to a life of being unwanted, unmarked, rejected by every pack. "Don't!" Cale's voice was urgent. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." Lyra met his eyes, saw the fear there, the understanding that she was about to risk everything on a gamble with impossible odds. "You said it yourself. The alliance depends on the lunar selection ceremony proceeding. If I bypass it without proving myself, the other territories will never accept me. There will always be whispers, always be challenges to my authority. This is the only way forward." "Then we'll find a different way. Rebuild the alliance on new terms. I don't care if it takes years." "But I do." Lyra touched his face gently, felt the spark of contact sing through her nerves. "I care that my daughter grows up in a stable world instead of one torn apart by war. I care that the Moonweavers who are still hiding have somewhere safe to emerge. I care about building something that lasts. So yes, I invoke the trial of worth." The warehouse went silent. Even Seraphina seemed shocked that Lyra would actually go through with it. Elder Tobias bowed his head in acknowledgement. "So witnessed. The trial of worth will commence at dawn tomorrow. Prepare yourself, Lady Lyra Frost. You're about to face something that hasn't been attempted in 3 centuries. May the moon guide your path." Lyra looked down at Nova, who'd come to stand beside her again, small hand slipping into hers. "What do you think, little star? Ready to watch your mother do something crazy?" "You're already doing something crazy." Nova smiled up at her, that impossible wisdom shining in her hybrid eyes. "You're believing in yourself. That's the craziest thing anyone can do." From the mouths of children came truth that adults spent lifetimes avoiding. Lyra squeezed her daughter's hand, felt Cale's presence solid and warm beside her, faced the assembled crowd with her spine straight and her silver eyes blazing. "Dawn, then," she said. "I'll be ready." The Luna's tower rose against the pre-dawn sky like a blade of crystallized moonlight, its walls humming with power that made Lyra's skin prickle with recognition. Ancient magic lived in those stones, old enough that even the council couldn't remember who'd built it or why, only that it responded to those deemed worthy of leadership and rejected everyone else with brutal efficiency. 24 hours until the trial began. 24 hours to prepare for tests that hadn't been attempted in 3 centuries, tests that could end with her barred from ever completing the mate bond with Kael, with Nova marked as unworthy for 3 generations. The stakes pressed against her chest like physical weight, making each breath a conscious effort. Finn walked beside her through the tower's entrance, Nova clutching her hand with nervous strength. The little girl's eyes kept shifting colors, silver to crimson and back again, a sure sign of stress that she couldn't quite control. Behind them came 2 royal guards, silent shadows ensuring they reached their destination without interference from Seraphina's faction. The tower's interior defied physics and common sense both. Corridors that should have been straight curved in impossible directions. Stairs that climbed upward somehow led down. Rooms appeared where moments before only wall had existed. It was disorienting by design, meant to test anyone who entered, to separate those with the mental fortitude to lead from those who would crumble under pressure. "Don't trust your eyes." Finn's voice echoed strangely in the crystalline passages. "The tower responds to intent more than direction. Think about where you need to go, and it will take you there. Fight it, and you'll wander forever." Lyra closed her eyes, reached for the calm she'd cultivated during 7 years as a tactical medic in the border wars. In combat, you couldn't afford panic, couldn't let fear cloud your judgment. You assessed, adapted, acted. The tower was just another hostile environment to navigate. She thought about the preparation chamber, about the space where candidates traditionally spent their final hours before facing the trial, pictured it clearly in her mind, a room of moonstone and silver where nervous women had paced for centuries, where some had found courage and others had found only terror. When she opened her eyes, a door stood before them that hadn't been there seconds ago. The tower had listened. The tower had responded. "Well done." Finn pushed the door open, revealing a circular chamber that matched her visualization perfectly. "Most candidates take hours to figure that out. You did it in seconds." "I've navigated worse." Lyra stepped inside, taking in the sparse furnishings. A pool of liquid moonlight in the center, radiating cold that had nothing to do with temperature. Ceremonial robes hanging on the wall, silver fabric that seemed to move even in still air. And dominating the far wall, a mirror that showed not her reflection, but something else entirely. The arena. Tomorrow's battlefield. She could see it clearly in the mirror's surface, a massive coliseum carved from black stone, tiered seating rising on all sides. The floor was sand, but not ordinary sand. Even through the mirror she could see the silver particles mixed throughout, could imagine how they would burn against Moonweaver's skin with every step. "They've modified the arena specifically for you." Finn moved to stand beside her, his reflection appearing in the mirror next to hers. Silver in the sand, silver dust in the air ventilation. They're going to make every breath, every movement hurt. "Who authorized that?" Lyra's voice stayed level despite the anger building in her chest. "The council voted, 7-3 in favor. They're calling it maintaining traditional standards, but we both know it's an attempt to sabotage you before the trial even begins." Finn's jaw clenched. Kale tried to override it. They reminded him that by invoking the trial, you placed yourself under council jurisdiction until it concludes. He has no authority to interfere. Lyra studied the arena, cataloging exits, sightlines, potential cover. The silver would hurt, yes, would burn and weaken and make every moment agony. But pain was just information, just her body's way of communicating stress. She'd operated on wounded soldiers while her own blood soaked through field dressings. She'd stitched closed wounds that should have killed her while enemy fire rained overhead. Pain was survivable. Failure wasn't. What else do I need to know? She turned from the mirror, met Finn's eyes directly. "You didn't get permission to be here. Kale can't interfere. So you're risking something by telling me this. What else?" Finn glanced at the guards by the door, made some subtle hand signal. They stepped outside, closing the door behind them. The silence that followed felt heavy with secrets about to be revealed. Seraphina's grandmother wasn't just any wolf. Finn pulled out a tablet, tapped it awake. Her name was Morgana Blackwater. Does that mean anything to you? The name hit like a fist to the gut. Every Moonweaver knew that name, whispered it like a curse in the darkness when speaking of the purge. Morgana Blackwater. The council member who'd led the charge to have her kind eliminated, who'd personally overseen the execution of entire family lines, who'd hunted Moonweavers with a zealotry that bordered on madness. "She killed my mother." Lyra's voice came out flat, emotionless. Safer that way. Emotion was weakness right now. "Tracked her down when I was 7. My mother hid me in a root cellar, told me not to make a sound no matter what I heard. Then she went outside to face them. I listened to her die for 3 hours. Listened to Morgana Blackwater ask questions between the screaming, always so polite, always so reasonable. Where are the others hiding? Who helps you? What bloodlines still survive?" My mother never answered. So Morgana kept cutting until there was nothing left to cut. Nova made a small wounded sound. Lyra had never told her that story, had kept the worst of the purge horrors locked away where a child's nightmares couldn't reach them. But there was no protecting her from it now. This was the world they lived in, the history they carried, the reason every moment of safety felt borrowed. "I'm sorry." Finn's words were inadequate, but genuine. "There's more. Morgana Blackwater wasn't just cruel. She was a bloodbinder, a dark magic practitioner." The revelation made Lyra's knees weak. She sat down hard on the edge of the moonlight pool, ignoring the cold that seeped through her clothing. A bloodbinder led the purge? But bloodbinders were just as illegal as Moonweavers. The council condemned all forms of magic that weren't strictly wolf-based. The council condemned what threatened them. Finn's voice carried bitter knowledge. Morgana was a bloodbinder. She could sense emotions, plant suggestions, bind someone's actions for short periods. She used those abilities to manipulate the other council members, to build fear and paranoia around Moonweavers while hiding her own magical nature. She feared we'd expose her. Understanding crashed over Lyra. Moonweavers can sense dark magic. We feel it like oil on water, something wrong and unnatural. She killed us to protect her secret. And she wasn't alone. Finn tapped the tablet, brought up images of council documents. 3 council members knew what she was, helped her orchestrate the purge in exchange for keeping their own secrets buried. One of those 3 is still active, still sitting on the council, still working to ensure Moonweavers stay extinct. Who? The question came out sharp as broken glass. I don't know yet. The documents are coded, the names obscured, but I'm close to figuring it out. Finn looked up from the tablet, his expression grave. Which brings me to the real problem. Serafina inherited her grandmother's abilities. She's a bloodbinder too. The tower seemed to tilt sideways. Lyra gripped the edge of the moonlight pool, felt the liquid cold seep into her palms. Does the council know? No. She's been very careful to hide it, but I've been watching her for months, tracking the pattern of her political victories. She always knows exactly what to say, exactly when to push, exactly how to manipulate situations to her advantage. It's not natural intuition. It's magic. And the trial has no rules against magic. The trial has no rules at all: strategy, strength, and sacrifice. How you demonstrate those qualities is left entirely to the candidate's discretion. Finn's meaning was clear. Serafina would use every advantage, including illegal magic, to ensure Lyra failed. Can bloodbinders affect other magic users? Lyra's mind was already working through scenarios, calculating odds, planning contingencies. I don't know. There's almost no documentation on bloodbinder capabilities because they were supposed to have been eliminated along with your kind. Finn hesitated, then added quietly, But Lyra, there's something else. Something about the 3rd test. Sacrifice. The records from the last trial are incomplete, but what survives suggests it's not a test of what you're willing to lose. It's a test of what you choose to keep. The candidate is presented with 2 impossible choices: power or love, authority or family, crown or mate. And whatever choice you make defines the kind of Luna you'll be. Lyra looked at Nova, who'd been listening to everything with those 2 knowing eyes. 5 years old, and already she understood more about cruelty and survival than most adults learned in a lifetime. If I choose power, I become the kind of leader who sacrifices personal connections for political gain. And if you choose love, you become the kind of leader who can be manipulated through those connections. Finn's voice was gentle but uncompromising. There's no right answer. That's the point. The test is designed to break you either way. Then I'll find a 3rd option. Lyra stood, her resolve hardening into something that felt like armor. There's always a 3rd option. You just have to be willing to see it. Lyra. Finn caught her arm before she could walk away. One more thing. Kale doesn't know about the bloodbinder connection, doesn't know that Serafina's using magic to manipulate events. If I tell him, he'll do something rash, challenge her directly, maybe even attack her. That's exactly what she wants. Justification to have him declared unfit for leadership. So we keep it between us. Lyra met his eyes, saw the loyalty there, the same dedication that had made him invaluable during the border wars. You keep investigating, find out which council member is the mole. I handle the trial, and we tell Kyle only when we have proof solid enough that he can act without being labeled a tyrant. Agreed. Finn released her arm, offered a warrior's salute instead. May the moon guide your path, Lady Lyra Frost. It's guided me this far. Lyra returned the salute, muscle memory from years of military service making the gesture smooth. I'm still here, still standing. That has to count for something. After Finn left, Lyra stood alone in the preparation chamber with Nova, the weight of tomorrow pressing down like a physical force. The little girl walked to the moonlight pool, stared down into its luminous depths with an expression far too serious for someone so young. "Mommy,
I'm scared. Nova's whisper was almost too quiet to hear. Me too, little star. Lyra knelt beside her daughter, pulled her close. It's okay to be scared. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. What if you fail? The question came out in a rush, all the terror Nova had been holding back spilling free. What if they hurt you? What if they take you away and I'm alone again? That's not going to happen. Lyra made her voice firm, certain, even though her own fear screamed otherwise. I've survived worse than a political trial. I've survived assassins and hunters and 3 years in the wilderness with nothing but determination and you. Tomorrow is just another challenge, and I'm very good at challenges. Nova's eyes shifted colors rapidly, her control slipping. The bad lady, Serafina. She wants to hurt us.
I can feel it. Her emotions taste like poison. Lyra went very still. You can sense her emotions? I can sense everyone's emotions. Nova looked up at her mother, confusion clear on her small face. Can't you? They're like colors in the air around people. Daddy's is storm gray and silver all mixed together. Uncle Finn's is deep blue like trust, but that lady's is black and red like infected wounds. A hybrid child born from a true mate bond between Moonweaver and Alpha King. What abilities would that combination create? Moonweavers could sense dark magic, could bear true mate children to any alpha, could manipulate moonlight itself in the old stories. Alpha Kings commanded with their voice, with their presence, with raw power that bent others to their will. What happened when you mixed those bloodlines? You got a child who could sense emotions like colors, who could break bloodbinder magic with a thought, who had eyes that glowed with impossible light. You got Nova. Something new, something the world had never seen before. Listen to me carefully. Lyra cupped Nova's face in both hands, made sure she had her daughter's full attention. During the trial tomorrow, you're going to be in the viewing area with Finn and your father. You're going to see things that frighten you. See me hurt, maybe. But I need you to be brave. Can you do that? I can try. Nova's voice was small but steady. That's all anyone can ask. Lyra kissed her forehead, breathed in the scent of her hair, pine and smoke, and something indefinably sweet. And Nova? If something happens, if somehow things go wrong, I need you to remember something. You are not what they call you. You're not an abomination or a bastard or anything else cruel people say. You're my daughter. You're Kael's daughter. You're the best thing I've ever created, and whatever happens tomorrow, that truth doesn't change. Nova's arms wrapped around her neck with desperate strength. They stayed that way for a long time, mother and daughter, drawing comfort from each other while the tower hummed around them and dawn crept closer with every passing moment. The night before the trial was traditionally spent in isolation, in meditation and preparation. But Lyra found she didn't want meditation. She wanted answers, wanted to understand what she was walking into tomorrow, what tests had broken candidates for 3 centuries. She approached the mirror again, placed her palm flat against its surface. The cold bit into her skin, but she kept contact, poured intention through the touch. Show me what I need to know. The mirror rippled like water, the arena image dissolving into something else. Memories? Visions? She couldn't tell, but she could see them clearly. Women in ceremonial robes standing where she would stand tomorrow, some proud, some terrified, all facing challenges that seemed designed to destroy rather than test. The first test, strategy. A scenario played out in the mirror's depths. A pack surrounded by enemies, resources dwindling, allies too far away to help. Each candidate offered solutions, some aggressive, some defensive, all evaluated by the council's critical eyes. Most failed not because their strategies were wrong, but because they showed only one dimension of thinking. They couldn't see past the obvious to the subtle truth beneath. The second test, strength. Not just physical combat, though that was part of it. The mirror showed challenges that tested every definition of strength: physical endurance through pain, emotional resilience in the face of cruelty, moral strength when presented with choices between survival and honor, Women who thought themselves powerful, broken by challenges that required vulnerability. Warriors defeated by puzzles that demanded compassion. The third test, sacrifice. Here the visions became fragmented, incomplete. Women standing before two pedestals, ancient artifacts glowing with power, choosing one, losing everything they'd fought for, choosing the other, losing everything they'd fought to protect. No winning scenario, no path forward that didn't end in loss. The mirror went dark, returning to its normal reflective state. Lyra stared at her own face, saw the determination there, the fear underneath it, the steel core that had kept her alive through impossible odds. "You're still awake." Cale's voice came from behind her, rough with exhaustion and something that might have been desperation. Lyra turned to find him standing in the doorway, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past few hours. His storm-gray eyes were shadowed with sleeplessness, his hair disarranged from running his hands through it repeatedly. He wasn't supposed to be here. Council rules forbade contact between the candidate and her mate before the trial. But here he stood anyway. Rules be damned. "You're risking a lot by coming here." Lyra's voice came out softer than she intended. "Let them try to stop me." Kyle stepped fully into the chamber, and she noticed he was alone. No guards, no beta, no one to witness this violation of tradition. "I've spent 3 years without you. I'm not spending another night the same way." "Nova's asleep." Lyra gestured to the small form curled up in the ceremonial robes, using them as a blanket, looking impossibly young and vulnerable. She was exhausted from stress. "And you?" Kyle moved closer, each step deliberate, giving her time to object. "Are you exhausted from stress?" "I'm terrified." The admission escaped before she could stop it. "I'm about to face tests that have broken every woman who attempted them for 3 centuries. Tests that are rigged against me specifically because of what I am. And if I fail, it's not just me who pays the price. It's Nova. It's you. It's every Moonweaver still hiding in fear. The weight of that is crushing me." Kyle closed the remaining distance, pulled her against his chest with careful strength. The mate bond sang between them, that invisible tether that had survived 3 years of separation, humming with renewed connection. His hand came up to cup the back of her head, fingers threading through her hair. "Then let me carry some of that weight." His words rumbled through his chest into her ear. "That's what mates do. We share the burden when it becomes too heavy for one." Lyra let herself lean into him, let herself take comfort from his solid presence and the warmth that radiated from his skin. For just a moment, she wasn't a candidate facing impossible trials, or a mother protecting her child, or a survivor carrying the weight of an extinct bloodline. She was just a woman being held by the man who'd searched for her through 3 years of darkness. "I saw you that night in the cave." Kale's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "Saw past the blood and terror to who you really were, a tactical medic who'd saved more lives than most warriors ever protected. A Moonweaver who should have died in the purge, but survived through intelligence and determination. A woman who looked at me, at the cursed Alpha King everyone feared, and saw someone worth trusting. Do you know how rare that is? How precious? I saw someone worth trusting because you were trustworthy." Lyra pulled back just enough to look up at him. "You could have turned me in, could have claimed the reward the council was offering for any surviving Moonweaver. Instead, you gave me documents and money and a chance at freedom. I fell in love with you that night." The admission came out raw, unguarded. Didn't mean to, didn't want to, knew it would complicate everything. But the mate bond snapped into place, and suddenly you were the most important thing in my world. When you vanished, when I couldn't find you, it was like losing a limb. Painful and wrong and impossible to ignore. "I thought you'd abandoned me." Lyra's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Thought I was just another wartime conquest, that the engagement announcement was proof you'd never really wanted me at all." "I've wanted you every day for 5 years. Kyle's hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing away the tear that finally escaped. "Wanted you through the fake engagement and the assassin hunts and the endless council meetings, wanted you through the lunar selection preparations and the political maneuvering and every moment of every day. That hasn't changed, won't change, can't change. Even if I fail tomorrow? The question came out small, frightened. Even then, Kale's voice was absolute certainty. We'll find another way. There's always another way. If the council won't accept you as Luna through the trial, I'll change the council. If the alliance fractures, I'll rebuild it on new terms. If they force me to choose between the throne and you, I choose you, every time, without hesitation. You can't mean that. Lyra's voice was thick with emotion. You've built everything on that throne. The unified territories, the end of the wars, the peace that's held for 5 years. You can't throw that away for me. Watch me. Kale's smile was fierce and possessive. I was a good king before I met you. I'll be a good king without a throne, but I can't be whole without my mate. So tomorrow you go into that arena and you fight with everything you have. And if the tests prove impossible, if the odds are truly insurmountable, you remember this. I'm waiting for you on the other side. We'll face whatever comes together. Lyra stood on her toes, pressed her lips to his in a kiss that tasted like promises and desperation, and 3 years of separation finally ended. The mate bond flared between them, silver and storm-gray light visible even in the dim chamber, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with physical heat. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kale pressed his forehead to hers in a gesture of intimacy more profound than the kiss. Sleep now. You need your strength for tomorrow. I'll watch over you and Nova, keep you safe until dawn. You can't stay. Even as she said it, Lyra was pulling him toward the pile of ceremonial robes where Nova slept. The council will declare the trial invalid if they find out. Then they won't find out. Kale settled beside her, pulled both her and Nova into the circle of his arms. Sleep, Lyra. Let me do this one thing. Let me protect you through the night. She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the distance that kept them safer in the political minefield they navigated, but exhaustion pulled at her bones, and the warmth of his presence made her feel safer than she had in 3 years. So she let herself relax, let her eyes close, let sleep claim her with her mate's steady heartbeat in her ear and her daughter's soft breathing against her chest. Tomorrow she would face the trial. Tonight she would rest. Dawn came too quickly and brought with it a pounding on the chamber door. Lyra jerked awake to find Kale already on his feet, already moving toward the entrance with predatory grace. Nova stirred against her chest, eyes fluttering open, immediately alert in the way children who'd grown up running learned to be. Finn's voice came through the door, urgent and low. My king, the council is gathering. The trial begins in 1 hour. You need to return to the royal viewing box before they notice your absence. Kale looked back at Lyra, his expression torn between duty and desire. She nodded, made the decision for him. Go. I'll be fine. We'll see each other in the arena. He crossed back to her in 3 strides, kissed her hard and fast, then did the same to Nova's forehead. Fight smart. Fight dirty if you have to. Come back to us. Then he was gone, slipping through the door before anyone could see him leave. Lyra heard his footsteps fading down the crystalline corridor, heard Finn's quieter tread following, heard the tower itself seem to sigh as if releasing tension it had been holding. Time to get ready, little star. Lyra stood, pulled Nova up with her. Let's show them what we're made of. The ceremonial robes fit perfectly, despite never having been sized to her frame. Tower magic, adjusting to whoever wore them, marking them as trial candidates. The fabric was silver so pure it seemed to glow with its own light, and the weight of it carried centuries of history. How many women had worn these robes? How many had walked into the arena believing they could win? How many had walked back out? Lyra braided her hair back in the same style she'd worn during the border wars, practical and secure. Nova helped, her small fingers surprisingly deft at weaving strands together. When they finished, Lyra looked in the mirror and saw a warrior looking back. Not an Omega, not a victim. A fighter who'd survived impossible odds and would continue surviving no matter what the council threw at her. The walk to the arena felt endless. Corridors that had been confusing the night before now led straight and true, the tower itself shepherding her toward her fate. Guards lined the passage, silent witnesses to her journey. None met her eyes. None spoke. They simply stood and watched as she passed, this Moonweaver who dared to claim Luna status, this Omega who'd seduced their Alpha King. Let them watch. Let them judge. She'd been judged her entire life and survived it all. The arena entrance loomed ahead, a massive archway carved with symbols she couldn't read. Beyond it, she could hear the crowd, thousands of voices creating a dull roar that spoke of anticipation and bloodlust both. They'd come to watch her fail, come to see the uppity Omega put in her place, come to witness history as the Moonweaver finally received the justice the Purge had missed. "Mommy," Nova's voice stopped her just before they reached the archway. "When you go out there, remember what I told you. Their emotions are colors. If you watch close, you can see what they're really feeling under what they're showing. I don't have your gift, little star." Lyra knelt down, met her daughter's impossible eyes. "I can't see emotions like you can. But you can see lies." Nova touched her mother's chest, right over her heart. "That's what Moonweavers do," Grandma told me in dreams. "You can sense when something's wrong, when something's dark and twisted. Trust that sense. It won't steer you wrong." Lyra pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace. This child who was wise beyond her years, this little girl who'd been forced to grow up too fast. "I love you. No matter what happens out there, remember that." "I know." Nova pulled back, smiled with more confidence than Lyra felt. "Now go show them why Moonweavers survived when everyone said we couldn't." Finn appeared from a side corridor, his expression grim but determined. "It's time. Nova will watch from the royal box with me and Kale. You'll have direct line of sight to us throughout the trial. If you need strength, look up. We'll be there." Lyra nodded, not trusting her voice. She squeezed Nova's hand one final time, then stepped through the archway into madness. The arena was massive, carved from black stone that seemed to swallow light. Tiered seating rose on all sides, packed with wolves from every territory, their faces a mixture of curiosity and hostility. The council sat in a special section elevated above the rest. 7 members in elaborate robes, looking down like gods passing judgment on mortals. Elder Tobias at their center, his weathered face unreadable. And there on the arena floor, waiting with perfect poise, stood the 12 alpha daughters in their ceremonial silver. Seraphina Blackwater at their center, looking like a vision of deadly beauty, her blonde hair pulled back to emphasize aristocratic features and eyes like blue ice. She smiled when she saw Lyra, a curve of lips that promised pain. The crowd noise died as Lyra stepped fully into the arena. The silence was worse than the roar had been, heavy with expectation and judgment. Every eye tracked her movement as she walked toward the center, where Elder Tobias descended from his platform to address them all. "We are gathered to witness the trial of worth." Tobias's voice carried through the arena with magical amplification. "Lady Lyra Frost has invoked ancient right to prove herself worthy of Luna status, despite not being chosen through traditional selection. She will face 3 tests: strategy, strength, and sacrifice. Failure in any test results in permanent rejection. Success in all 3 grants her the Luna crown, regardless of political consideration." He turned to look directly at Lyra, his ancient eyes searching her face for something she couldn't name. "Do you understand the stakes, Lady Frost? If you fail, you will be barred from completing the mate bond with Alpha King Kale Stormborn. Your daughter will be marked as coming from unworthy bloodline for 3 generations. There is no second chance, no appeal, no mercy." "I understand." Lyra's voice came out steady despite the fear racing through her veins. "Then let the first test begin." Tobias raised his hand, and the arena floor began to shift, black stone flowing like liquid, reforming into something new. A massive holographic display appeared in the center, 3-dimensional and detailed, showing terrain and tactical positions. The test of strategy. You will be presented with an impossible military scenario. Your solution will be judged by the council based on effectiveness, creativity, and adherence to pack law. The hologram solidified into clarity. A pack surrounded by enemies, outnumbered 4-1, winter closing in, food supplies dwindling, allies 3 days away, civilians including elderly and pups needing protection. The kind of scenario Lyra had faced dozens of times during the border wars, the kind that had no clean solutions, only choices between bad and worse. "You have 20 minutes to present your strategy." Tobias gestured to the Alpha Daughters. "Each candidate will have their turn. Lady Isla of Ironwood will begin." Isla stepped forward, her mechanical arm brace gleaming in the arena lights. She studied the scenario for exactly 30 seconds before speaking with crisp military precision. "Fortify defensive positions, establish rotating watch schedules, ration food supplies to last 6 days instead of 3, send fastest messengers to allies requesting immediate assistance, hold position and wait for reinforcements." The council members made notes on tablets. Some nodded approvingly at the textbook defensive strategy. Others looked less impressed, but said nothing. One by one, the Alpha Daughters presented their solutions. Lady Mira suggested aggressive scouting to find enemy weak points. Princess Cordelia recommended splitting forces to confuse enemy intelligence. Serafina proposed negotiating surrender of civilians to save warrior strength, which made several council members frown, but others nod with pragmatic approval. Finally, it was Lyra's turn. She approached the hologram, studied it not for 30 seconds, but for 5 full minutes. Let them think she was slow, uncertain. She was actually cataloging every detail, every assumption built into the scenario, every unstated element that revealed more than the obvious. "This scenario is flawed." Lyra's words made the crowd murmur with confusion. Elder Tobias frowned. "Explain. You've presented an impossible situation and asked for a solution. But the real question isn't how to survive it. The question is why we're in this position at all." Lyra manipulated the hologram with gestures, pulling back the view to show larger strategic context. A pack this size doesn't get surrounded by accident. Either intelligence failures led to poor positioning, or this is a deliberate trap, which means the solution isn't tactical. It's understanding the true nature of the threat. She zoomed in on the enemy forces, highlighted patterns in their deployment. These aren't raiders seeking supplies. Raiders don't maintain siege positions for extended periods. These aren't rivals seeking territory. The land here is resource poor, not worth the effort. This is personal. This is revenge or elimination, which means negotiation is pointless. They want us dead or gone. The council members leaned forward, interest replacing skepticism. "So instead of defending or attacking or waiting for allies, I do the unexpected." Lyra made the hologram shift, showing new positions. "I fake a plague outbreak, use every civilian as actors showing symptoms. Wolves fear disease outbreaks more than combat because they spread uncontrollably through packs. The enemy withdraws to avoid contamination. We use that window to relocate, not to better defensive positions, but to offensive ones. When they return thinking we're weakened by plague, we ambush from strength." "That's deception." Alpha Ronan spoke up from the council section, his voice harsh with disapproval. "Dishonorable." "That's survival." Lyra met his gaze without flinching. "And if the scenario is truly impossible as stated, then impossible problems require unconventional solutions. A Luna who can only think within traditional boundaries will lead her pack to traditional defeats. I'd rather win dishonorably than lose with my honor intact." The silence that followed her words felt heavy with judgment. Some council members looked scandalized, others thoughtful. Elder Tobias's expression gave nothing away. "Unconventional," he said finally, "but effective." Lady Frost advances to the second test. The arena floor shifted again, this time creating obstacles and barriers. The hologram disappeared, replaced by physical challenges. Lyra felt her stomach tighten as she noticed what she'd feared. Silver dust coating every surface, silver particles suspended in the air creating a faint shimmer. Every breath would burn, every step would hurt. They weren't just testing her strength. They were testing her ability to function while in constant agony. "The test of strength." Tobias's voice carried grim satisfaction. "Not merely physical, not merely endurance. True strength encompasses the will to continue when every instinct screams to stop. You will face 3 challenges in succession. All candidates will attempt them simultaneously. The 3 who complete them fastest advance to the final test. The 12 Alpha Daughters moved to starting positions around the arena floor. Lyra found herself between Seraphina and Isla, both women looking at her with unconcealed hostility. The silver dust was already making her skin prickle, the Moonweaver sensitivity to the metal amplifying its effect. First challenge. Tobias pointed to a series of walls rising from the arena floor. The silver maze. Navigate to the center and retrieve the Luna's token. The walls are pure silver. Physical contact will burn. Choose your path carefully. A horn sounded, and the Alpha Daughters charged forward. Lyra stayed still, watching them go, letting them rush ahead in their eagerness to prove themselves. She could already hear their gasps of pain as hands brushed silver walls, see them jerking back from accidental contact. Then she closed her eyes, reached for the sense Nova had talked about, the sense that let Moonweavers detect dark magic, that warned them when something was wrong. She extended that sense through the maze, feeling for the path that felt cleanest, least corrupted by silver. There. A route that wound longer than the direct paths but kept her from touching walls. She opened her eyes and began moving, smooth and controlled, navigating by feel as much as sight. Behind her she could hear Seraphina cursing, Isla's mechanical arms sparking where it scraped silver, other daughters calling out in pain. Lyra reached the center of the maze third, behind Mira, who'd used clever acrobatics to vault over lower walls, and behind Seraphina, who'd pushed through despite the burns covering her hands. But while the other 2 were gasping and injured, Lyra was merely winded. Silver dust in her lungs hurt, but manageable pain was survivable pain. She grabbed the Luna's token, a silver disc that burned against her palm, and made her way back out. The maze dissolved behind them as they emerged, the arena floor shifting to the next challenge. Second challenge. Tobias pointed to pedestals rising from the ground, each topped with a massive stone. The burden test. Each stone is engraved with a name representing a pack burden. You must carry it to the summit platform. Choose which burden you'll bear. The Alpha Daughters rushed forward to claim their stones, each trying to select the lightest. Lyra approached slowly, reading the names carved into each burden: duty, honor, legacy, protection. See, justice. And there at the end, heaviest of all, the stone that everyone had avoided: shame. The weight of it represented every Moonweaver killed in the purge, every family line erased, every child murdered for the crime of existing, 30 years of genocide and fear and loss, all compressed into stone that made her knees buckle when she tried to lift it. "That's too heavy for you." Seraphina's voice came from behind, sweet with false concern and real satisfaction. "Perhaps choose something more appropriate to your station. Omegas shouldn't try to carry what Alphas can bear." Lyra ignored her, focused on the stone, on the weight that represented her people's suffering. She thought about her mother dying slowly, while Morgana Blackwater asked questions. Thought about hiding in that root cellar for 3 days before daring to emerge. Thought about every moment of the past 30 years when being Moonweaver meant death. Her eyes began to glow silver, not intentionally, not as a display of power, simply as a response to emotion too large to contain. And as they glowed, something strange happened. The stone remained heavy, impossibly heavy, but she could feel other hands helping her lift it. Ghostly hands, translucent, dozens of them appearing around the burden. The spirits of dead Moonweavers lending their strength to the last of their kind. With their help, she lifted shame and began walking toward the summit platform. Each step was agony. Each breath felt like her last. But she kept moving, kept climbing, kept refusing to let the burden crush her. The ghostly hands stayed with her, supporting, encouraging, reminding her that she carried not just the weight of the past, but the hope of the future. She reached the summit fifth, behind Seraphina, who'd chosen duty, behind Mira with honor, behind Isla with justice, behind Princess Cordelia, who'd somehow managed protection despite her injuries. But while they'd climbed with their own strength alone, Lyra had climbed with the strength of 100 dead Moonweavers supporting her. And that made all the difference. The arena fell into awed silence as the ghostly hands faded, as Lyra stood atop the summit with tears streaming down her face and silver light blazing from her eyes. Even the hostile members of the crowd seemed moved by what they'd witnessed, the visual representation of a bloodline refusing to die, refusing to let their sacrifice be forgotten. Third challenge. Tobias's voice broke the spell. The choice. 2 doors will appear. Behind one lies guaranteed advancement to the final test. Behind the other lies elimination. But someone else will be trapped in consequence of your choice. Choose salvation or sacrifice. Choose self or other. Choose now. 2 massive doors materialized on the arena floor. Above one, glowing letters spelled, "Save yourself." Above the other, "Save another." And in a cage of pure silver between them, burning and suffering, sat Isla of Ironwood, trapped by the very challenge that was supposed to test them. Lyra understood immediately. This wasn't just about choosing. It was about what you chose and why. The alphas who'd already advanced stood at their doors, hands hovering over "Save yourself," the obvious path forward. Only Lyra and Mira remained to choose. And between them, Isla burned. Serafina didn't hesitate, pushed through her door without looking back. Cordelia followed. One by one, the advanced candidates chose self-preservation over mercy, until only Lyra, Mira, and the burning Isla remained. Mira looked at Lyra, looked at Isla, looked at the door marked, "Save yourself." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry, but I can't." And she too chose the door that led forward, leaving them behind. Lyra walked to the cage, placed her hands on the silver bars despite the immediate burning pain. Isla looked up at her with confusion and something that might have been hope. "You tried to strike my daughter yesterday." Lyra's voice was steady despite the agony in her palms. "You called me names, treated me like I was less than dirt on your boots. Give me one reason I should help you." "I can't." Isla's voice was broken, raw from screaming. "I don't deserve it." "No," Lyra agreed. "You don't, but I'm helping you anyway. Because mercy isn't about deserving. It's about choosing compassion when vengeance would be easier. It's about being the person I want my daughter to grow up to become." She opened the cage, using the mechanism hidden at its base, pulled Isla free, pushed her toward safety. The princess collapsed outside the silver, gasping and burned but alive. She looked up at Lyra with wonder and shame both. Why? One word, carrying a universe of confusion. "Because you matter," Lyra said simply. "Even when you don't deserve it. Even when you hate me. You matter. And a Luna who can't see that isn't worth the title." Elder Tobias stood from his seat, his ancient face showing emotion for the first time. The second test concludes, but Lady Frost chose the door marked "Save Another." By the rules, she should be eliminated. The crowd murmured, some satisfied, others confused. Lyra felt her heart sink. She'd known the choice would come with consequences, had made it anyway. At least Isla was safe. At least she'd acted with honor. "However," Tobias continued, his voice carrying new weight, "the true test was never about the doors. It was about character. Strength isn't merely endurance. It's choosing mercy when cruelty would be easier. Lady Frost alone demonstrated true Luna strength. Therefore she advances. All others are eliminated." Chaos erupted. Serafina shrieked in protest. The Alpha daughters who'd chosen self-preservation looked stunned. The crowd roared with confusion and approval both. But through it all, Lyra stood tall, her hands burned and bleeding, her body racked with pain from silver exposure, but her spirit unbroken. She'd passed the second test. Now only one remained. Sacrifice. And if the visions in the mirror had been true, it would be the test that broke her. The arena floor rippled like water disturbed by stones, black stone flowing and reforming into something new. Lyra stood at the center, her hands still bleeding from the silver cage, her lungs burning from hours of breathing air laced with the metal that poisoned her kind. Around her the crowd had gone silent again, that heavy, expectant silence that came before execution or coronation, before endings that changed everything. Elder Tobias descended from his platform, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd lived too long and seen too much. His weathered face showed something Lyra couldn't quite read. Regret? Anticipation? Fear? Whatever it was, it made her spine straighten despite exhaustion screaming through every muscle. The final test. His voice carried across the arena, amplified by magic that made each word feel like a physical touch. Sacrifice. The test that has broken every candidate for 300 years. The test that asks not what you're willing to lose, but what you choose to keep when you cannot have everything. The stone beneath Lyra's feet split apart, creating a chasm that yawned wider with each passing second. She stumbled backward, caught her balance at the edge, looked down into darkness so complete it seemed to swallow light itself. And rising from that darkness came two pillars, one on each side of the chasm, connected by a bridge so narrow it would barely support her weight. On the far platform, two pedestals materialized. One held a crown of pure moonstone, pale and luminous, pulsing with power that called to something deep in her chest. The Luna crown, the symbol of ultimate authority, the artifact that would give her the right to rule beside Kael, to protect her people, to change laws and rebuild the world into something better than what the Purge had left behind. On the other pedestal sat a small crystal vial, no larger than her thumb, filled with liquid that seemed to contain captured starlight. It glowed with soft radiance, beautiful and terrible both. The crown grants absolute authority as Luna Queen. Tobias's voice held the weight of centuries. The power to abolish the Purge laws permanently, to offer sanctuary to every surviving Moonweaver, to reshape pack society into something new, everything you fought for, everything you need to protect your people. He gestured to the vial. The cure contains the only remedy to the touch curse afflicting Alpha King Kael Stormborn. One dose, administered correctly, will break the dark magic that has plagued him since the border wars. He'll be able to hold his daughter without pain, touch his mate without agony, live without constant suffering. Lyra's heart clenched painfully. She looked up at the royal viewing box where Kael sat with Nova in his lap, Finn standing guard beside them. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in Kael's frame, could see how carefully he held Nova to minimize contact, could see the pain he hid behind his king's mask. "You may choose one," Tobias continued. "Only one. Choose the crown, and you become Luna Queen with all the authority that entails. But Kael suffers his curse forever, unable to touch without pain, unable to be the father Nova deserves. Choose the cure, and your mate is healed, your family is whole, but you'll never wear the crown. The alliance will fracture without a proper Luna. War will return, and the Moonweavers who are still hiding will remain hunted because you lack the authority to protect them." The impossible choice, power or love, authority or family, save thousands or save one. Lyra felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest, making each breath a conscious effort. This is the test of sacrifice. Tobias's voice was almost gentle now. Not what you're willing to lose, what you're willing to live without, what matters most when you cannot have everything. Choose now, Lady Frost. The blood moon rises in 1 hour. Your time is limited. Lyra looked at the two pedestals, at the impossible choice between them, looked up at Nova, whose hybrid eyes were wide with fear and understanding both. Looked at Kael, who was shaking his head, mouthing words she could read even without hearing them. Choose the crown, save your people. But how could she? How could she condemn him to a lifetime of suffering when she had the power to end it? How could she watch Nova grow up with a father who couldn't embrace her without pain, couldn't ruffle her hair or tuck her in at night without his own body screaming in agony? The crowd began to murmur, too. Some calling for her to choose the crown, the practical choice, the one that served the greater good.
others shouting for the cure, claiming that a Luna who would abandon her mate's suffering was no Luna at all. The noise built and built until it felt like physical pressure against her skull. Lyra closed her eyes, blocked out the crowd, blocked out everything except the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. Think. This was a test that had broken every candidate for 3 centuries. Why? Not because the choice was hard. Hard choices were survivable. This choice was designed to be impossible, to force failure no matter what path was chosen, unless there was a third path, unless she was missing something crucial about the nature of the test itself. She opened her eyes, looked not at the pedestals, but at the space between them, at the bridge connecting the 2 platforms, at the chasm yawning beneath, darkness so complete it seemed alive. And in that darkness something moved. A flicker of light, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it.
Elder Tobias, Lyra's voice cut through the crowd noise. You said this test has broken every candidate for 300 years. How many have attempted it? The old wolf's eyes narrowed slightly. 17. And how many survived to attempt it? How many passed the first 2 tests? 23. 6 withdrew before the final test began. Why would they withdraw? Lyra pressed. They'd come so far, risked so much. Why stop at the threshold of victory? Tobias said nothing, but something flickered across his weathered face. Understanding? Approval? She couldn't tell, but his silence was answer enough. They withdrew because they realized the test wasn't about choosing. Lyra said slowly, pieces falling into place. It's about recognizing when the choice itself is a trap. The crowd's noise died instantly, every eye fixed on her with sudden intensity. On the royal platform, Finn had gone very still. Kael leaned forward, his storm-gray eyes blazing with something that might have been hope. You present 2 options, both reasonable, both justified, both guaranteed to cause suffering no matter which I select. Lyra began walking toward the bridge, her steps careful on the narrow stone. Choose the crown, and I become the kind of leader who sacrifices personal connections for political expediency. A Luna who uses people, even those she loves, as tools for the greater good. That's not leadership. That's tyranny with good intentions. She took another step, the chasm yawning beneath her feet. Choose the cure, and I become the kind of leader who can be manipulated through emotional attachments, who'll compromise principles to protect those close to her, who'll watch thousands suffer to spare one person pain. That's not love. That's selfishness disguised as devotion. Then you concede defeat? Seraphina's voice rang out from where she stood with the other eliminated candidates. Triumph colored her tone, but something else lurked beneath it. Uncertainty, perhaps. A tremor that suggested her confidence was fracturing. If both choices are wrong, you're admitting the test is impossible. By the rules, that's failure. No. Lyra reached the center of the bridge, stood directly above the darkest part of the chasm. I'm admitting the premise is false. You don't become Luna Queen by choosing between power and love. You become Luna Queen by refusing to accept that they're opposites. She looked directly at Elder Tobias. The Moonweavers weren't eliminated because we were dangerous. We were eliminated because we proved something the old power structures couldn't tolerate. That true mate bonds create stronger pacts than political marriages. That love and duty aren't opposed forces, but complementary ones. That the best leaders are those who fight for their people, not just with them. Lyra knelt on the bridge, placed both palms flat against the cold stone, reached for the sense Nova had described, the ability Moonweavers possessed to detect wrongness, to sense when dark magic corrupted natural order. And there, beneath the stone, beneath the test itself, she felt it, a pulse of power that tasted like oil and corruption. This test is rigged. Her voice carried absolute certainty. There's dark magic woven through it. Bloodbinder magic. Someone designed this test not to measure worth but to guarantee failure. To ensure that no Moonweaver could ever claim Luna status. To protect their own position by making sure anyone who challenged the established order would destroy themselves trying. The arena erupted into chaos. Council members shouting denials. Crowd members demanding explanation. But Seraphina's face had gone white as fresh snow. her blue eyes wide with something that looked like panic mixed with something else. Recognition, perhaps. The terrible understanding of someone realizing their grandmother's legacy was about to be exposed in ways she'd spent her whole life avoiding. Lies! Alpha Ronan's voice boomed across the space, his face flushing red with rage that seemed too performative, too desperate. She's making excuses for her own inadequacy. Guard, remove her from the arena. She's failed the test. No. A new voice spoke, female and ethereal, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. She's past it. The air above the chasm shimmered, rippled, tore apart like fabric. And stepping through the tear came a figure that made every wolf in the arena drop to their knees involuntarily. Translucent, shimmering with moonlight, beautiful beyond mortal measure. A ghost, but not just any ghost. Queen Alara Stormborn, Kael's mother, dead 8 years but standing before them as real as memory and twice as powerful. Mother! Kael's voice broke on the word, raw with grief and shock and desperate hope. The Ghost Queen smiled at her son, that expression carrying love so profound it made Lyra's chest ache. But Alara's eyes, when they turned to address the crowd, were hard as diamonds and twice as sharp. And they were silver, pure Moonweaver silver that glowed with ancient power. Did you truly think my son was the first Alpha King to take a Moonweaver as mate? Alara's voice echoed with otherworldly resonance. The bloodlines have been intertwined for generations. Hidden, yes. Protected, always. But present in ways you never suspected. Elder Tobias had gone gray as ash, but Lyra noticed something crucial. He wasn't shocked. He was afraid. There was a difference. Shock came from unexpected revelation. Fear came from secrets finally catching up. Impossible. Queen Alara Stormborn died of natural causes. The records show no sign of Moonweaver heritage. The records show what my mate wanted them to show. Alara drifted closer to the council platform, her form casting no shadow. Alpha King Aldrich knew what I was, loved me anyway, protected me through the purge years by falsifying documents and hiding the truth even from our son. He knew that if the council discovered a Moonweaver sat beside him on the throne, certain members would find a way to eliminate me. So he lied, and I let him. And our secret died with us both. She turned to Kael, whose face showed every emotion struggling for dominance. Shock, grief, anger, understanding, all warring behind storm-gray eyes that suddenly made so much more sense. Silver wolf eyes passed through maternal bloodlines. He'd inherited fragments of power he'd never understood, abilities he'd attributed to royal heritage when they'd actually come from something older, something supposedly extinct. I'm sorry, my son. Alara's voice gentled. Sorry we never told you the truth. Sorry you grew up thinking you were purely Stormborn when half your strength comes from bloodlines the council tried to erase, but we had reasons. The same council that ordered the purge still holds power. The same wolves who murdered children for the crime of their parentage still make laws. We couldn't risk you. Couldn't risk that they'd eliminate the heir to secure their own positions. Which council members? Kael's voice was dangerously quiet, and Lyra could see rage building behind his careful control. Not the explosive kind, the cold, calculating kind that planned and waited and struck with surgical precision. Which ones knew about the purge corruption? Which ones are still hiding their crimes? Alara's ghostly hand pointed directly at Elder Tobias. Him, Alpha Ronan, and the late council member Thane, 3 who conspired with Morgana Blackwater to orchestrate genocide, not because Moonweavers were dangerous, but because we threatened their carefully constructed power structures, because true mate bonds would have undermined their political marriages and alliance arrangements, because we could sense dark magic, and all 3 of them were practicing it. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Tobias's face had gone from gray to red, fury and fear mixing in equal measure, but his hands were trembling. Subtle. Most wouldn't notice. But Lyra had spent 7 years reading body language in combat situations. Those trembling hands told the truth his face tried to deny. These are the ravings of a ghost. The dead have no testimony in council proceedings. But the living do. Finn's voice rang out as he descended from the royal viewing box, tablet in hand, his expression grimmer than Lyra had ever seen it. "I've spent the last 6 months unsealing palace records, found everything. Payment receipts to Morgana Blackwater, execution orders signed by Tobias and Ronan, communications discussing how best to eliminate Moonweaver bloodlines while protecting their own illegal magic use. All documented, all verified, all admissible in formal inquiry." He held up the tablet, displayed images for all to see. Documents stamped with official seals, correspondence in handwriting that matched council records, evidence so damning that even loyal supporters began backing away from Tobias and Ronan, with horror dawning on their faces. "Traitor!" Ronan lunged toward Finn, his control finally snapping after minutes of visible deterioration. His face had been getting redder, his breathing harder, his hands clenching and unclenching as evidence mounted. Now he shifted mid-motion into his wolf form, a massive gray beast with murder in his yellow eyes and foam flecking his jaws. He never reached his target. Kale moved faster than thought, intercepted mid-leap, 2 alphas colliding in the air with bone-cracking force. They hit the arena floor in a tangle of fur and fangs, Kale's black wolf larger, stronger, fueled by righteous rage that had been building for 8 years, for a mother he'd mourned, for a mate he'd lost, for a daughter who'd grown up in hiding, for an entire bloodline nearly erased because of greed and fear. The fight was brutal and brief. Kale's jaws found Ronan's throat, held there with enough pressure to threaten but not quite kill. A warning, a promise. Submit or die. Ronan went limp, showing his belly in the ultimate gesture of surrender. Kale released him, shifted back to human form, stood over the fallen alpha with death in his eyes, but control in his actions. "By the authority vested in me as Alpha King, I strip you of rank and title. You'll face formal trial for genocide, conspiracy, and treason against the unified Pax. If found guilty, and you will be found guilty because the evidence is overwhelming, you'll be exiled to the borderlands, permanently." He turned his gaze to Tobias, who hadn't moved from his platform, but whose weathered face now showed naked calculation. Not the face of someone caught by surprise. The face of someone whose carefully laid plans were unraveling and who was already computing his next move. "You have one chance to make this easier. Confess now. Tell us which other council members knew. Give us names and we'll consider mercy." "Mercy?" Tobias laughed, the sound brittle as breaking glass, but with an undercurrent of defiance that spoke to decades of unchecked authority. "You speak of mercy while stripping away centuries of tradition? While allowing that abomination to claim Luna status? While letting Moonweavers walk free when they should have been eliminated with the rest of the corruption?" "Moonweavers aren't corruption." Lyra's voice cut through the tension, clear and strong despite exhaustion, weighing on every word. "We're evolution, the natural progression of wolf bloodlines toward something stronger than what fear and prejudice created. You killed us because we proved that your way wasn't the only way, that political marriages built on duty could never be as strong as true mate bonds built on choice. That power shared is stronger than power hoarded." She walked across the bridge toward the 2 pedestals, her steps sure despite exhaustion threatening to buckle her knees. Reached the platform and stood between the crown and the cure, between impossible choices that were never meant to be choices at all. The test demanded I sacrifice something precious. Choose power or love, duty or family, the greater good or personal happiness. Lyra picked up the crown in one hand, felt its weight, its power, its promise humming against her palm like electricity seeking ground. But those aren't opposites. They never were. That's the lie the old power structures needed us to believe, that to be strong we must be cold, that to lead we must be distant, that love makes us weak instead of giving us something worth fighting for. She picked up the cure with her other hand, felt the vial's warmth, its potential, its hope concentrated into liquid form. "So I reject the premise of your test. I choose both. Not out of greed, but out of understanding that a Luna Queen who abandons her mate's suffering isn't worthy of the title, and a mate who accepts power, bought with her family's pain, isn't worth following. Choosing both means death." Tobias's voice carried grim satisfaction, but also something desperate, like a man watching his last gambit fail. The test's magic will tear you apart for trying to have everything. You'll die screaming, destroyed by your own hubris. Then I'll die proving the test was corrupt from the beginning. Lyra met his eyes without flinching, saw the moment he realized she meant it, saw his satisfaction crack into something closer to fear. But I don't think I'll die. I think this test was designed to fail anyone who tried to think outside the binary choice. Designed by someone who couldn't imagine that power and love could coexist. Someone whose own corruption made them blind to what real strength looks like. She brought the crown and cure together, pressed them against her chest over her heart. The moment they touched her skin, the arena exploded with light. Power surged through her body like lightning through a conduit. Silver and gold and crystalline white, all swirling together. Her veins began to glow beneath her skin, visible networks of light spreading from her chest outward. It hurt. Every cell in her body felt like it was being rewritten, torn apart, and reassembled into something new. But she held on, refused to drop either artifact, refused to let pain force her into the binary choice that would have guaranteed failure. Above her, the blood moon began to rise early, pulled by the power she was channeling. Its crimson light bathed the arena, mixing with her silver glow to create patterns that hadn't been seen in living memory. Ancient Moonweaver magic responding to need, to desperation, to someone finally strong enough to bridge the gap between what was and what could be. "Mommy!" Nova's scream cut through the light and chaos. The little girl had broken free from Finn's protective grip, was running across the arena floor toward where her mother stood, burning with impossible power. "Please don't die! Please!" The child's voice penetrated where nothing else could have. Lyra opened eyes she hadn't realized she'd closed, looked down at her daughter racing toward her with tears streaming down her face, looked past Nova to where Kyle stood at the arena's edge, every muscle in his body tensed with the need to intervene, held back only by Finn's hand on his shoulder and the knowledge that interfering now could kill her faster than the test itself. "I'm not dying, little star." Lyra's voice came out steady, despite the agony coursing through her. "I'm just changing the rules." Nova reached the bridge, started to cross it, her small feet sure on the narrow stone. She wasn't afraid, wasn't hesitating. Just running toward her mother with absolute trust that everything would be okay, because Mommy always made everything okay, even when the world said it was impossible. The child's presence changed something in the test's magic. Lyra felt it shift, felt the aggressive, destructive force trying to tear her apart, pause as if confused. Nova's hybrid nature, her impossible existence, her proof that Moonweaver and Alpha King bloodlines could create something stronger than either alone, acted like a key in a lock that had been sealed for centuries. The little girl reached the platform, threw her arms around Lyra's legs, hugged tight. Her touch completed a circuit that had been incomplete, her hybrid power bridging the gap between the crown's authority and the cure's healing. The artifacts began to change in Lyra's hands, their forms flowing like liquid, merging together into something that had never existed before. The crown and cure became one. The moonstone of the former absorbed the liquid light of the latter, creating a circlet that pulsed with both power and healing, authority and love, duty and family, all bound together in perfect balance. It rose from her hands of its own accord, settled onto her head with a weight that felt right, felt earned, felt like destiny finally catching up to choice. The light that had been tearing her apart transformed, became something that healed instead of harmed. Lyra felt the burns on her hands from silver exposure fade to pink, then to nothing, felt her lungs clear of the poison she'd been breathing for hours, felt strength return to muscles pushed far past their limits. The crown was healing her, proving that power could nurture instead of only commanding, that authority wielded with love was stronger than dominance maintained through fear. And more than that, she could feel the magic extending outward through the mate bond, reaching for Kale across the distance, finding the dark curse that had plagued him for 8 years, the magic that turned his greatest strength into his deepest weakness. The crown's healing power flowed into him through their connection, through the bond that had survived 5 years of separation and an entire council's attempts to destroy it. Kyle gasped, stumbled, caught himself on the arena railing. His hands were shaking, not with pain, but with its sudden absence. For the first time in 8 years, touching something didn't hurt. For the first time since the curse had settled into his bones like poison, he could reach out without flinching, could make contact without his own body betraying him. He vaulted the railing without thinking, crossed the arena floor in long strides, climbed onto the platform where Lyra stood with Nova still clutching her legs and the crown glowing on her head like captured moonlight, reached out and touched her face with trembling fingers, felt skin against skin without the curse screaming in protest. "It's gone." His voice was rough with emotion barely contained. "The curse is gone. Not gone." Lyra leaned into his touch, savored the contact she'd feared she might never feel again without watching him suffer for it. Transformed, like everything else tonight. Pain into healing, weakness into strength, separation into connection. She reached down, scooped Nova up into her arms, pulled both her daughter and her mate close. Kale's arms came around them both, holding his family for the first time, without pain mediating every touch, without having to calculate how long he could endure before agony became too much. Nova laughed with delight, that pure, joyous sound of childhood finally allowed to be childhood without fear coloring every moment, and the arena erupted into chaos that was somehow celebration instead of condemnation. Not everyone was celebrating. Elder Tobias stood on his platform with fury and fear warring across his weathered face, but resignation was creeping in around the edges, the expression of someone who'd played a long game and finally lost. "This is impossible. The test should have killed her. The magic should have torn her apart for trying to claim both artifacts." The magic responded to truth. Queen Alara's ghost drifted closer to the council platform, her translucent form glowing brighter in the blood moon's light. "Truth you've been running from for 30 years, that Moonweavers weren't eliminated because we were dangerous. We were eliminated because we proved your system was broken, and now my daughter by bond has proven it again. Power and love aren't opposites. They're complementary forces. The strongest leaders are those who fight for something beyond themselves. The best rulers are those who understand that authority without compassion is just tyranny with better documentation." She turned to address the full arena, her voice carrying to every corner with otherworldly resonance. The Luna's crown was never meant to be claimed through sacrifice alone. It was meant to be earned by someone strong enough to reject false choices, someone wise enough to see past binary thinking, someone brave enough to risk everything for what matters most. Lyra Frost has proven herself worthy not by choosing power over love or love over power, but by refusing to accept that choosing between them was necessary. The Ghost Queen's form began to fade, moonlight dissolving back into moonlight. But before she disappeared entirely, she looked at her son one final time. "I'm sorry we hid the truth from you. Sorry you grew up thinking you were something less than what you are. But know this, your father and I loved you with everything we had, protected you the only way we knew how, and we're so proud of the king you've become, the king who didn't let fear or prejudice dictate his choices, the king who found his true mate and fought to keep her despite every obstacle. That's the legacy that matters, not bloodlines or titles or political alliances, love that refuses to break even when the whole world demands it bend." Then she was gone, dissolving into light that flowed into the crown on Lyra's head. The last queen blessing the new one, the last of the hidden Moonweavers passing the torch to the first, who could stand openly, 8 years of being dead, finding purpose in helping the living move forward. Elder Tobias made a sound like a wounded animal, but there was defeat in it now, the realization that his time was over. "No, this isn't over. The council still has authority. We can overturn this farce of a trial, can declare the Luna selection invalid, can maintain the old laws even if you try to change them." The council had authority. Kael's voice was cold enough to freeze fire, final as a judge's gavel. Past tense. As of this moment, I'm invoking sovereign's right under Article 7 of the Unification Treaty. The Council is dissolved pending formal inquiry into genocide, conspiracy, and treason charges. Any member who wishes to maintain their position will submit to truth verification through Moonweaver sensory abilities. Anyone who refuses automatically admits guilt. "You can't do this!" Tobias's voice climbed toward hysteria, his careful composure finally shattering completely. "The territories won't accept it. The other alphas will revolt. You're throwing away everything you built for her." "No." Kale looked at Lyra, at Nova, at his family whole and safe for the first time. "I'm rebuilding on a foundation that actually matters. The old alliance was built on fear and political marriages and maintaining power structures that served the few at the expense of the many. The new alliance will be built on true mate bonds and mutual respect, and the understanding that strength comes from unity instead of dominance." He raised his voice to address the full arena, his alpha command making every word resonate with undeniable authority. "Any alpha who objects to the new order is welcome to challenge me directly. Any territory that refuses to accept Moonweaver refugees is welcome to withdraw from the alliance. But understand this. The purge laws are abolished as of now. Every surviving Moonweaver is granted full citizenship and protection. Anyone who harms them answers to me personally, and I promise you, my mercy has limits that my mate's does not." The arena fell silent. Then, one by one, wolves began to kneel, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, in acceptance of change that had been decades overdue, in recognition that what they'd witnessed wasn't destruction of tradition, but evolution of it into something that could actually survive the test of time and scrutiny. Even some of the eliminated alpha daughters knelt. Isla of Ironwood, who Lyra had saved from the silver cage. Mira of Nightfall, who'd watched Lyra choose mercy over advancement. Others who'd competed against her, but couldn't deny what she'd proven through action rather than words. That being Luna wasn't about political maneuvering or aristocratic bloodlines. It was about strength of character and willingness to sacrifice for something larger than personal ambition. Only Seraphina remained standing, her beautiful face twisted with emotions that warred visibly across her features. Rage, yes, but also something deeper. Something that looked almost like grief, mixed with desperate confusion. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides, her breathing shallow and rapid. The careful composure she'd maintained throughout the trial was cracking, revealing something raw beneath. "This isn't over." Her voice came out strangled, thick with tears she was fighting not to shed. "You think dissolving the council stops what's been set in motion? You think exposing 3 conspirators ends the rot?" She took a shaky breath, and Lyra could see the war happening behind those blue ice eyes. Belief systems crumbling, worldviews shattering, everything Seraphina had been taught confronting everything she'd just witnessed. There are others who still believe the purge was justified, who still see Moonweavers as corruption that needs cleansing, and they won't stop just because you wear a pretty crown and parade your hybrid child around like she's something to celebrate instead of... She trailed off, couldn't finish the sentence. Because Nova was looking at her with those impossible eyes, not with hatred or fear, but with a child's frank curiosity, watching the adult world tear itself apart and trying to understand why people chose cruelty when kindness was an option. "Instead of what?" Lyra asked quietly. No anger in her voice, only tired compassion for someone struggling against indoctrination that had started in childhood. "Instead of eliminating? Is that what your grandmother taught you? That children like mine deserve death for the crime of existing?" "She taught me that weakness destroys packs." Seraphina's voice broke on the words. "That sentiment is a luxury we can't afford. That hard choices separate leaders from followers. That power requires sacrifice, and sometimes that sacrifice is other people's lives." Tears were streaming down her face now, her perfect aristocratic composure completely shattered. "She taught me that Moonweavers were corruption incarnate, that they'd destroy everything our ancestors built if we let them survive. And I believed her because she was my grandmother and she was powerful and she'd survived when others hadn't, and that had to mean something. She looked at Lyra with something desperate in her eyes. Not hatred now, confusion. The look of someone whose foundation had been ripped away and who was free falling without knowing how to find ground. But you saved Isla, when you could have advanced by leaving her to burn. You chose mercy when cruelty would have been easier. You claimed both artifacts when logic said it would kill you. You keep proving that everything I was taught was wrong, and I don't know how to reconcile that. Don't know how to accept that my grandmother was a monster instead of a hero. Don't know how to live with the knowledge that I've spent my entire life working toward goals that were built on genocide and lies. Careful. Kael's Alpha command crashed over Serafina like a physical force, but there was less heat in it now, more caution. You're speaking about my daughter, my mate, my Luna Queen. Keep testing my patience and you'll discover exactly how much I'm willing to tolerate. But Lyra raised her hand, gestured for Kael to release the command. She stepped forward to address Serafina directly, Nova still balanced on her hip, the crown glowing softly in the blood moon's diminishing light as dawn approached. You're right. Lyra's voice was calm, measured, but not without empathy for someone clearly struggling. This isn't over. Exposing 3 council members doesn't eliminate prejudice that's been building for 30 years. Abolishing the purge laws doesn't automatically change hearts and minds. There will be others who resist, who cling to old fears and old hatreds because change is terrifying and familiar. Evil feels safer than uncertain good. She knelt down to Serafina's level, despite the other woman's standing position, a gesture that made her vulnerable but also equalized the power dynamic between Luna Queen and disgraced candidate. Met those blue ice eyes that were drowning in tears and confusion. But here's what you need to understand. I'm not just fighting for myself anymore. I'm fighting for every Moonweaver who's still hiding, for every hybrid child who might be born now that true mate bonds are possible again, for every wolf who's been told their bloodline makes them less instead of simply different. And I will win. Not because I'm stronger than my enemies, though I am. Not because I have the crown's authority, though I do. I'll win because my cause is just and yours isn't. Because history remembers those who built bridges instead of those who burned them. She stood, extended her hand down toward Serafina. An offer, a test, a chance. So you have a choice. Keep fighting for a system that's already crumbling. Keep clinging to your grandmother's legacy of genocide and corruption. Die bitter and alone defending prejudices that history will condemn. Or change. Accept that you were wrong. Work to repair the damage your family caused. Become part of the solution instead of the problem. I'm offering you redemption. Once. Take it or don't. But this is the only time I'll extend mercy towards someone who's done nothing to earn it. Serafina stared at that outstretched hand like it was a viper preparing to strike. Conflict played across her face with painful visibility. Years of indoctrination warring with the evidence of her own eyes. She'd watched Lyra pass tests designed to be impossible, watched her choose mercy over advancement, love over power, compassion over vengeance, watched her transform the Luna's trial from a tool of oppression into a testament to evolution. And somewhere beneath the programming and prejudice, Serafina's own sense of honor was screaming that what she'd witnessed was right in ways her grandmother's teachings never had been. Finally, slowly, her hand rose, trembling, uncertain, but rising, clasped Lyra's with a grip that felt like drowning person grabbing a lifeline, let herself be pulled to her feet by the woman she'd tried so hard to destroy, and the gesture felt like surrendering more than just physical position. I don't forgive easily. Serafina's voice was scraped raw by emotion, barely above a whisper. Don't know if I can change beliefs I've held my entire life. Don't know if redemption is even possible for someone whose family orchestrated genocide. Don't know how to be anything other than what my grandmother made me. Redemption isn't about knowing. Lyra released her hand, but held her gaze, kept that connection even as Serafina looked like she might flee at any moment. It's about trying, About choosing better, even when everything you've learned says the old ways were right. Your grandmother's sins aren't yours unless you continue them. Your family's legacy isn't written yet. You can still choose what story gets told about the Blackwater name. Mass murderer or reformed protector, architect of genocide or guardian of the survivors. The choice is yours. But it starts with accepting that you were wrong, and that takes more courage than holding on to comfortable lies. What would you have me do? Serafina's question carried genuine uncertainty, the voice of someone whose roadmap had been destroyed and who was navigating without compass or stars. I'm a bloodbinder, illegal magic user, just like those council members you're prosecuting. By your own standards, I should face trial, should face punishment, should probably face execution for what I've done, what I've tried to do. You will face trial. Lyra's voice was firm, no false comfort in it. And there will be consequences. But there's a difference between using illegal magic to orchestrate genocide and using it because your grandmother taught you nothing else. Between wielding power to oppress and being willing to redirect it toward protection. You'll stand trial. You'll provide testimony against other conspirators. You'll help us root out the remaining corruption your grandmother planted. And if you're serious about redemption, if you genuinely want to change, then your consequences will include service. You'll train our people to defend against bloodbinder attacks. You'll use your abilities to detect dark magic in others. You'll protect the bloodlines your grandmother tried to erase. That's how you earn forgiveness. Through action, not words. Through years of proving you're more than your worst moments. Kale descended from the platform, Finn and several royal guards following with hands on weapons, but not drawn. Professional caution rather than immediate threat. Lady Serafina Blackwater, you're under formal arrest for conspiracy to manipulate the Luna's trial, for use of illegal dark magic, and for attempted sabotage of a Luna candidate. You'll be held in protective custody pending trial. If you cooperate, if you provide testimony against other conspirators, if you demonstrate genuine commitment to change, we'll consider clemency. Refuse, and you'll face the same exile awaiting Tobias and Ronan. Choose. Serafina looked at the guards surrounding her, at the crowd watching with hostile eyes mixed with some that showed uncertainty about what justice should look like in this new order. Looked at the reality of consequences, finally catching up to decades of unchecked privilege and learned prejudice. Then she looked at Nova, still balanced on Lyra's hip, watching everything with a child's frank assessment and wisdom that shouldn't exist in someone so young. The child. Serafina's voice was quiet, broken, but searching for something that might feel like truth. Your daughter. I called her an abomination, tried to have her taken from you, plotted to ensure she'd grow up believing she was worthless and wrong and deserving of elimination. And you're still offering mercy, still extending your hand. Why? Because she's watching. Lyra adjusted Nova's weight, felt her daughter's small arms tighten around her neck in response. And I want her to learn that vengeance is easy, but justice is hard. That showing mercy to those who don't deserve it is harder than showing strength to those who fear it. That the best way to defeat your enemies is to turn them into allies, because allies working together are stronger than enemies destroying each other. Your grandmother taught you hate. I'm teaching my daughter something better. And if you're willing to learn alongside her, there's space for that. But you have to choose it. I can't force redemption on you. You have to want to be better than what your family made you. Serafina's composure finally cracked completely. Tears spilled down her perfect face, grief and shame and relief mixing together in a maelstrom of emotion she'd been holding back for hours, maybe years, maybe her entire life. I'll cooperate, give testimony, name names, tell you everything I know about the conspiracy and the other bloodbinders and where the corruption runs deepest, and I'll serve however you demand. Just please, please let me try to be better than what my family made me. Let me try to build something instead of destroying. Let me prove that change is possible even for someone like me. That's all anyone can ask. Lyra nodded to the guards, her voice carrying Luna authority now, the weight of the crown making her commands resonate with power that demanded obedience. Take her into protective custody. There will be others who want her silenced before she can testify. Keep her safe until the formal inquiry. She's under my personal protection, which means anyone who harms her answers to me." As the guards led Serafina away, the arena began to empty. Wolves filing out in relative silence, processing what they'd witnessed. A trial that had turned into an execution of old power structures. A test that had exposed corruption at the highest levels. A Moonweaver who'd claimed Luna status not through political maneuvering, but through sheer force of character and refusal to accept false choices as inevitable. Lyra stood on the platform with Kael beside her and Nova in her arms, watching the crowd disperse, feeling exhaustion finally catching up now that the immediate crisis had passed. The crown on her head felt heavy and light simultaneously, burden and blessing bound together. "It's done." Kael's arm came around her waist, steadying her when her knees threatened to buckle. "You did it. Against impossible odds and rigged tests, and an entire system designed to ensure you'd fail. You did it." "We did it." Lyra leaned against him, drew strength from his solid presence, and the warmth of his body pressed against hers. "You and Nova and Finn, and even Serafina in her own broken way. No one does impossible things alone. We just have to be willing to ask for help and accept it when it's offered." Nova stirred against her shoulder, voice sleep-soft, but content in ways Lyra hadn't heard in 5 years of constant running. "Mommy, can we go home now? I'm tired." Home. The words settled into Lyra's chest like warmth. They had a home now. Not a cave or abandoned building or temporary shelter. A real home with walls and beds and safety. A place where Nova could be a child instead of a survivor. Where Lyra could rest without constantly calculating the next escape route. Where Kael could hold his family without pain mediating every touch. "Yes, little star." Lyra pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead, breathed in the scent of her hair that still smelled like pine and smoke from their years in the wilderness, but would soon smell like the palace gardens and fresh bread and childhood, allowed to be childhood. "We can go home." Finn approached with a vehicle already waiting, military efficiency ensuring the Luna Queen's departure would be smooth and secure. The territories are already responding. Messages coming in. Most expressing support, some requesting clarification, a few threatening withdrawal but in the minority. The new order is taking hold faster than expected. People were ready for change even if they didn't know it. Then tomorrow we start building it properly. Kael helped Lyra into the vehicle, settled Nova beside her mother, took the seat across from them both. Tonight we rest. Tomorrow we work. The drive through pre-dawn streets showed a city just starting to wake. Morning vendors setting up stalls. Early shift workers heading to their posts. Life continuing despite the political upheaval that would reshape their world. Normal people living normal lives while the powerful few decided what shape that world would take. And Lyra felt the weight of that responsibility settle onto her shoulders alongside the crown. She would wear it well. Would fight for those normal people living normal lives, would build something better than what fear and prejudice had created. But tonight, she would simply rest. The palace loomed ahead, massive and ancient, seat of power that was now partially hers. Their chambers waited, soft beds and safety, and the profound luxury of not having to run. Nova was already asleep against her shoulder, exhausted by hours of stress and fear finally released. Kael carried their daughter to her room, settled her under blankets while Lyra watched from the doorway. Father and daughter, reunited after 5 years of separation, finally able to build the relationship that should have started at birth. "She looks peaceful." Kael joined Lyra, wrapped his arms around her from behind, rested his chin on her shoulder in a gesture of intimacy that would have been impossible yesterday. "For the first time since I met her, she looks like a child instead of a soldier." "She can be a child now." Lyra leaned back against his chest, let herself be held without fear coloring the contact. "Can play and learn and make mistakes without every error potentially meaning death. Can have friends and toys and normal childhood problems instead of survival as her only concern. We gave her that. Today, in that arena, we gave her the future she deserves." They moved to their own room, to the bed that would be theirs for however long this strange new life lasted. Lyra expected exhaustion to claim her immediately, but instead found herself restless, adrenaline still humming through her system despite the day's end and the blood moon setting outside their window. "Can't sleep?" Cale noticed, pulled her close, let her lean against his chest, and listen to his heartbeat that had survived wars and curses and 5 years of searching. "It's the aftermath. Your body is still preparing for threats that aren't coming. Give it time. It'll catch up eventually. We have time now, all the time in the world." "What if I'm not strong enough?" The question escaped before Lyra could stop it, 5 years of doubt pouring free now that she had space to feel it. "What if I'm not enough to be what they need? What if the territories fracture and war returns, and it's my fault for pushing too hard too fast? What if I fail everyone who's counting on me to build something better?" "Then we'll deal with it." Cale's answer was simple, certain, absolute as gravity. "Together. That's what mates do, what partners do. You don't have to be strong enough alone. You have me. Have Finn. Have every wolf who's chosen to support the new order. Have 847 dead Moonweavers whose spirits demand justice. You're not alone anymore, Lyra. Stop acting like you are. Stop carrying weight that was meant to be shared." The words settled into her chest like balm on wounds she hadn't realized were still open and bleeding. Not alone, not running, not hiding, just living, with all the mess and uncertainty and possibility that implied. Just building, one day at a time, something better than what came before. She turned in his arms, pressed her lips to his in a kiss that tasted like promises renewed and hope finally allowed to flourish without fear crushing it. The mate bond sang between them, silver and storm-gray light visible even through closed eyelids, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with physical contact and everything to do with souls recognizing their match. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cale pressed his forehead to hers in that gesture of intimacy more profound than any kiss. "We'll make mistakes. We'll face crises we can't predict. We'll have moments when everything feels impossible, but we'll face it together. That's the promise I made 5 years ago when the bond snapped into place. That's the promise I'm renewing now. Together, always, no matter what comes." "Together," Lyra echoed, the word feeling like vow and hope and determination all bound together. Always. Outside the window, dawn broke over the palace gardens where memorial flowers would soon bloom. 847 names carved in stone and honored in silver petals. Remembrance and hope growing from the same soil. The past acknowledged, the future built, the present lived one moment at a time by people brave enough to believe that change was possible even when history said otherwise. And in the royal chambers, a family slept peacefully for the first time in 5 years, safe, united, ready to face whatever came next, together.